Good morning.
Bonjour.
Good morning. Today is that's so weird. Today is August the 28th. It's a beautiful day, isn't it? It's the end of summer, and not officially. I'm sorry, it's not the end of summer. That comes in September, but it's the end of summer as most of us think of it, right? When you're a child, you have school off, and if you have kids of your own, it's or young people that you take care of, it's the end of summer, right? It's back to school season, and obviously that's always a bittersweet time. For parents, it's pretty sweet. Thankfully, this kid you've had to entertain for the last two and a half months is going to be going back to school, where he or she can entertain themselves with their peers. And obviously for the kid, it's pretty bitter because you got to go back to school, which for most kids suck. Most kids aren't huge fans of school, so that's pretty bitter. Obviously, if you're an adult, you're not going back to school. It is still a bit of a bittersweet time though, because last night I got home at probably, I want to say 9:30, and it was pitch black outside. Right, the sun had completely set, and so obviously it's a sign that summer is over, right? No more staying out till 10 o'clock waiting for the sun to set, which is unfortunate. But these are the seasons, right? And time moves forward, so we make do. Of course, autumn is it's a fantastic season. I think probably spring and fall are my favorite seasons in terms of just temperature and comfort level. But also it is the time when, of course, people are, for lack of a better word, hunkering down and preparing for the coming winter, right? Making sure that they are ready, their families, their properties, winter-proofing, weather-proofing, water-proofing, taking care of last-minute maintenance that has come up. And, of course, for some people, moving, right? Of course, maybe you're moving so your kids can change schools. Maybe you get a new job opportunity. For a lot of industries, obviously, things kind of slow down in the summer where everybody's kind of taking their foot off the gas pedal. So things tend to kind of pick back up in September. Inshallah, that's what will happen for us. And, that means people get hired, and maybe those jobs require you to relocate. I know of someone who is currently relocating to Vancouver. Right, they got hired by a firm and they're moving them out to Vancouver. So you got people moving for those reasons as well. So the fall, all times of the year, they bring plenty of opportunity, right? I was going to talk about it later, but I think this is the right time. I mention this all the time, but gratitude, right? There's a certain perspective of abundance, let's say, that says that we should be grateful for those things which we have in our lives, all of those things. And it's especially important to be grateful for the things that don't necessarily appear to be opportunities or good things or blessings, because we as people are much too limited in our ability to actually judge what is good and bad for us. And so sometimes things that seem like they are bad things turn out to be good things, and things that seem that they are good things turn out to be bad things. And so really we can only count our blessings and be thankful for the opportunities we're given and make the most of them, right? And 9 times out of 10, whether or not something is a good thing or a bad thing in your life comes down to how you handle it, right? There's very few things that are objectively good or bad in life. And so the ending of summer, you could get bummed out about it. Oh, it's going to get cold and blah, 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 whatever complaints you have. Or you can recognize that there's a bunch of opportunity that's encapsulated in that change, and that's there and available for you to take advantage of to make your life better, to make your month better, make your year better, make your job better, or make your investment portfolio better. right? So with the end of summer comes plenty of opportunity for you and I to grow as people and investors. Yesterday, I went to the casino, which is not something that I usually do. I'm not much of a gambler. But I went down to Niagara Falls, went to the casino, play some craps or whatever. I've never played craps in my life, but we went to the casino and played whatever, some casino games. And while I was there, I started thinking of a book I've recommended to you in the past, or I've spoken to you about in the past. It's called Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. And Annie Duke was a world-class poker player who played, World Series of Poker and that kind of thing. And so she wrote this book called Thinking in Bets. And the book, I guess later in her career, she kind of became a business consultant kind of a thing. And so the book is kind of written from the perspective of a poker player making decisions, playing poker, and what mindset you can derive from that, and then how you can bring that mindset to bear on other problems that you might have in life, and how the strategic and calculating posture of a poker player can be useful and be applied to other aspects of life, right? And so it's a very good book conceptually. It's a little bit of a boring read, I found, or listen. I actually listened to it. It was a bit boring to listen to, but the concepts in it were really, really good. And one of the things is you've got to break your problems down. Right? If you have a big problem, you break it into smaller problems. It's pretty basic, straightforward advice, right? But then when you break those problems down to smaller problems, now you think about them in terms of bets, right? In terms of probabilities, right? What are the odds that things are going to go this way versus that way? And what am I going to do if they go this way? And what am I going to do if they go that way? And that's thinking in bets, right? So to make the example very, very obvious, right? I'm sitting at the blackjack table. This is not a true story. I'm just making it up. Sitting at the blackjack table, the dealer, hits me. I draw a queen, right? That's 10. I say hit. The dealer hits me. I draw a king. That's 20, right? Well, I've got 20. My objective is to get to 21. I'm not going to hit, right? It would be a silly bet. There's 1 out of 13 ways to draw a card that would get me to blackjack, and 12 out of 13 ways to bust and lose the game, right? It's a bad bet with bad probabilities. If I make that bet, 12 out of 13 times I lose money, right? So that's like an 8% return or something like that, which is a very difficult amount to justify, especially because my return in blackjack, the way the odds are, is not going to outweigh those 12 losses. So that's thinking in bets, right? Blackjack is a great example of that because everything in blackjack is basically a wager. Poker is obviously very similar, right? If you, I don't know, if you flop the nuts and you've got, I don't know, like ace, pocket aces or like ace queen suited or something like that, right? You got flush draw, you've got a full house or a 4 of a kind draw, right? Obviously bet on that, right? Now when the river comes down and you get 3, 4, 7, and it's completely useless to what you were dealt. Well, your next bet, you're not going to be as aggressive, right? On the river card, you're probably not going to push as hard as you pushed before you saw the flop, thinking that you had the leading hand, right? And so you have a lot of control over the outcome by thinking in bets, because at each stage, you only have so much information, right? You never see the full picture. By the time you've seen the full picture, you've had to involve major decisions, right? So you make your first bet. Okay, I think I'm in a good position. This is a good, strong hand, and push other people out of the pool. And then so everybody falls out of the pool. Now the probability of them having a better hand than you becomes 0. So if you're playing at a table of 6 people, you might bet aggressively on your pair of aces, hoping that 4 or 5 other players fold. If all 5 of them fold, you win. Maybe not very much money. So you're hoping maybe 4 of them fold, and that's you versus one other person. And now the next round, you've got to figure out, okay, does this person have me beat? Do they have something better than my pair of aces or my straight draw or my flush draw, right? And you go a couple rounds, you all know how poker works, and eventually it is revealed who has made the right decisions, or somebody gets forced out, right? This is thinking in bets. That is, at each stage, we take the information that we know and we use it to try to predict what the probabilities of each outcome are, and then make a decision based on those probabilities, right? Obviously, if you had a 7 and a 2, you wouldn't bet like that. I mean, you might as a bluff, but in general, you're not going to chase that 7-2 pairing very hard because you know it's not a good hand. It's not a strong hand. Right? And so your probability of losing your bets is very high. So you're not going to make those bets, right? So I was at the casino, and obviously I've listened to this book, and so I was thinking about it. And so I for me, when I go to the casino, I like to play roulette. I like to play the table games. I'm human beings. I hate slot machines. I don't understand it all. I mean, literally, I was amazed to look at them yesterday, because you look at the slot machines now, and like all the old slot machines are gone. They've all been replaced by these like gigantic iPads, basically. So basically what they're, right? It's like a giant screen. It's all digital, touch screen, whatever. And you're sitting there. Maybe there's a couple buttons and a lever for the old people, but basically it's a touch screen, and it's playing whatever slot game on it, right? I hate that crap, because to me, computers, they're such a cheat. Like, you know, the casino has those odds dialed in, and they can modulate the payout and blah, blah, blah. I don't know how much of that they'll cop to, or what the legal regulations are on what they can and can't do with those machines, but I know what the technological capabilities are, and I don't understand why anybody plays them. I mean, if you find them to be fun, then good for you, but I look at them and I think that they're the biggest scam. Not because you can't win on them or anything like that, because of course people do win, just you have very little control. And I bring my investor mentality to everything, right? Control is probably the most important thing to me, right? And so I was playing roulette yesterday. That's the game I was playing. It's a game I like to play. Blackjack's obviously another table game. Craps, baccarat. I don't know how to play those games, but I'd love to learn. I've always wanted to learn how to play craps. I don't know how to. The same with baccarat. They actually had Pai Gao as well. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a weird, I believe it's Chinese originally, tile game. So kind of like dominoes, but it's not played like dominoes. I mean, the cards are like dominoes, but it's played very differently. It's more like a poker or something like that. They also had that, which I thought was really strange and probably a very interesting game. I've heard it's very strategic, but I don't know how to play it at all. Anyways, sitting there playing roulette, right? Roulette's a very simple game, right? You have, 36 spaces. Yeah, 36 spaces plus 2 zeros, or 3 zeros if you're playing a Monaco style table, right? So either 2 or 3 zeros, which means you have a total of 38 or 39 positions that the ball can fall in, right? And then you're betting. There's the inside track and the outside track. So the inside track, you're betting numbers, right? So you're picking numbers 3, 5, 7, or maybe a split 3, 2, or a split 3, 4, 7, 5. Right? You're picking numbers. And then on the outside, of course, you're picking bigger probability bets. So color, odd even, first third, second third, fourth third, or first row, second row, third row. So those are the options that you have to bet on the outside, and the probabilities are all quite a bit lower on the outside because they're much cleaner bets, right? With your odds of it being black or red is approximately 50%, less the 5% for those 2 green squares, right? Which would bust you out. So very, very simple game, and very easy to understand the probabilities. When you play a game like that, you are in control to an extent of how much risk you take. Now, obviously, as with all things in the casino, the casino's got their hand on the scale. But when you play a game like roulette, you can at least push back on that scale a little bit, right? So you sit down, maybe your minimum bet is 5, or it'll actually be 25 on the inside, but in $5 denominations. So you basically make 5 inside bets. So if you want to, you can pick 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Those are your numbers. You've got $5 riding on each one. Obviously, if you hit, it's 1 in 36, right? So they pay out 36 times your bet. So you can turn that $5 into $170 or whatever. Pretty good deal. Excuse me. If you hit your number, which of course the probability is quite low on. Excuse me. Also, you can bet the corners on the inside, right? So you can put a chip and it covers multiple numbers. And now you split that bet basically between the 2 or 4 numbers that you're covering. So these are all the different ways that you can bet, right? And I played roulette for a couple hours because I was paying close attention to my probabilities, to my bets, right? So I was always trying to cover at least 50% of the table, basically, right? So that my odds were always in my favor that I would win something. The way I accomplished that was pretty simple. I'd bet $25 on the inside, and I'd bet between $25, $50, and $100 on the outside, depending on how many times I'd lost out there. Pretty straightforward, right? Obviously, usually you lose the $25 that you bet inside because you don't hit any of the numbers. But if you do hit, you do well. And then on the outside, you can only really double or lose your money, right? That's kind of how it works. They're 2-to-1 odds for the colored or odd even bets, which is the ones I'm making. So, I'd, for example, bet on black, whatever, 25, let's say. Then I'd lose, it'd be red. So I'd bet 50 on black, maybe I'd lose again, it'd be red again. So now I'll put 100 on black, right? Black's got to come up sometime. If I keep doubling down, I should, in theory, get my money back. So, okay, third time, and I put 100 on. Oh, I won, doubled up. Okay, got back the money I had previously lost, right? And then you can continue. So you're kind of playing the probability, right? And there's different ways to do that. You can do it the way I did it, which is probably the safest and least likely to get you headway to do it. Or you could, bet on the inside and just spread your money out and go for a bigger return on a lower probability bet, right? If you play 5 positions, that's 5 out of 38 are your odds to win, right? You could play those 5 positions to cover 4 each, which would then be 20 out of 38 odds to win, right? The payout, of course, not as high, but it's because it's no longer 36-to-1. It's now going to be 9-to-1. But still, right? You've now got more than 50% of the board covered, right? So the odds are kind of in your favor for you to win against the casino. Now, I say kind of because roulette is special. It's got those green squares. You lose if it lands on the green squares. That just is what it is, unless you bet on them, right? That's how the game is rigged. And so there's something great that we can learn about real estate investing from the casino. Obviously, casino is a business. Obviously, it is an investment. It is an asset for somebody or somebody's, right? In the case of Ontario, it's an asset for the government. Out in the world, you have the MGMs of the world and whatever in Las Vegas. They're the assets of corporations and people, and they make money for those people, just like your real estate investment or your laundromat business would do, right? And so a casino is a very interesting type of business as compared to most businesses because a casino is inherently day in and day out investing money, cash money. Now, it's not investing it in the investing is probably not the right word. Oh, no, I shouldn't say that. Yeah, the casino is investing that money, and it is investing it into a speculative wager against you, the player. Now, the language I'm using is very important, right? It's investing that money into a speculative wager, right? So a speculative wager is not an investment, first and foremost. Everybody recognizes that gambling is not investing, right? And I would never suggest otherwise. It is not. A speculative wager is speculation, and you make money speculating, but it's not investing. But, excuse me, if you are the casino, it is absolutely an investment. You seek to generate regular cash flow from doing this, right? So how does the casino accomplish this goal, and what can you learn about them as an investor? The casino accomplishes this goal through repetition, massive scale, right? And by controlling the terms. So when you go into a casino is essentially a broker, if you will, of sorts, of deals. And they're not unlike a real estate agent. And you go into the casino and the broker's sitting there and is saying, hey, will you play this game? I'll give you a 10% chance to win. I'll give you a 10% chance to win 8 times your money, right? So that means that 1 time in 10, I should win 8x my bet, and 9 times out of 10, I should lose my bet. Over the long term, the casino has a 20% advantage over me, the bettor. But there's a chance I can win, and I'm willing to take that wager, right? That's what they're selling. And the answer is yes or no. Let's just say those are your odds at a slot machine. I don't know. And of course, just like the market for real estate or for anything else, people have different levels of risk tolerance, and different levels of sophistication. So they offer different products, right? Somebody who's very risk averse might say, hey, I want to put $20 in the slot machine. I can control that. I'll play penny slots, 5 cents, 10 cents, 25 cents a spin, whatever it is. And yes, I know my odds are like 1 in 100 that I win anything meaningful, but my odds are very low that I lose anything meaningful, right? Obviously, there are other people who want to play high stakes poker or whatever, right? And are willing to wager large sums of money and risk large amounts of wealth in exchange for the opportunity to potentially win it. Large sums of money, large amounts of wealth, right? If you look at something like the World Poker Tour, the top poker players are winning, millions, tens of millions of dollars, and the buy-in for those tournaments might be $10,000, right? So that's not a small wager that you're making, but for a potentially high upside, right? And so what you'll see with the casino is the more control that the casino gives you in a given game, the lower the payout will generally be. The exception might be poker. I'm not actually sure. I don't usually play casino poker, but if I understand it correctly, the casino takes a cut. So they don't care. They don't care how you gamble. They're just taking a cut of the pots. So in that case, it's irrelevant to them, the odds. But for anything else, the more you're able to control your odds, the lower the payout, right? And so going back to roulette, it's a perfect example. When you bet on the outside, you have pretty good control of your odds. So the table pays 2-1, and the probability is slightly about 5% against you, right? And so that means that if you sit down long enough, you will lose money because the odds just go in the casino's favor, right? 5% of the time they win everything, period. Right? And so they're playing those odds, that probability long term. And they're doing it at massive scale. So they're not playing that bet 1 time against you. They're playing that bet 100 times an hour, right? And so if you play that bet 100 times an hour, 5% of the time, you just win outright. Then 5 out of every 100 bets, you just take their money, right? And so over time, if all of your games, let's say, have a 5% advantage, then you're going to end up 5% up over the long run, right? That's what the probability tells us. And that's basically how casinos operate, right? And their focus, right? They can't control price. I mean, they have very little control over price. That is, if you want to come in and gamble with $2 or $200 or $200,000, the casino really has no way to influence that, right? But what they control are the terms. So much like in a real estate deal where you might control the terms, right? Closing, vendor take back loans, financing. They control the terms of these bets, these arrangements. You control the price, right? You sit down, put $100 in a slot machine or $10 in a slot machine. You can put $50 at the roulette table or $500, right? So you control the price. The only thing they control is the terms. But what they do is they prepare the terms in such a way, right? And they only are open to certain types of deals, right? You cannot bet with the casino on your terms. You bet on their terms, right? And on their terms, they're willing to take your bet all day because they've set up all of the terms to favor them in the long run, right? to leverage people's greed, self-interest, immediacy bias against long-term profits. So you do the same thing, right? What's an example of leveraging someone's immediacy bias? That's easy. A good old-fashioned buy and hold is an example of that, right? If you're looking to buy a house, which everybody here is, right? Then if you're looking to buy a house, maybe that house is $1.2 million. I don't know, just as an example. And you can't afford it because the down payment is going to be $240,000 and you only have $100 saved up in the bank. And that's probably optimistic for a lot of people, but let's just say, well, you can't afford that $1.2 million house, but you have an immediacy bias. That is, you want to live somewhere today, regardless of whether or not you can afford to buy that house, right? You got a family to feed, clothe, well, shelter, whatever. You don't want to be rained on. So you need to live today. So how do I leverage your immediacy bias as an investor? It's pretty straightforward, right? I am going to buy the property for $1.2 million. I'm going to rent it to you for all of my expenses plus a premium, 5%, 10%, whatever it is. And so you are going to pay me a little bit of profit every single month. And over the long term, I'm going to profit massively because you needed something today. You couldn't delay gratification until tomorrow. Casino is a little bit more manipulative than that because it's not something that you need or want today, right? It's not something that you need today. You just want the opportunity to have more money. That's the carrot they hold in front of you. Obviously, an investor doesn't do that. They hold the carrot of a home or shelter or whatever, a place to start your business, et cetera, et cetera. But that is a way that we can take advantage of the immediacy bias, right? And get people moving towards doing deals with us that we find advantageous, right? And there's a lot of examples of that, right? You might assign contracts. So, for example, you might buy a condo that is in pre-construction right now. It'll be ready in 3 years. And you might wait 2 years, right? Because you got the money for the down payment, right? You got the whatever, 60K, 100K, whatever it's going to cost to buy one pre-construction. They start building the condo. You don't want to live there. So now you can assign that contract to somebody who did not have the financial means to buy that condo pre-construction, but they want in. And so now they can pay you a premium, right, over what you paid for that condo, so that they can get in because they have an immediacy bias. They don't want to wait 3 more years now that they can afford a place, right? And so you've done the job of basically being a placeholder for them, right? Holding their place in line, if you will. They didn't know they wanted to get in that line when you did, but you've essentially held the place in line for them and now sold it to them, charging them a premium for holding that place in line, right? Very simple. So it's about positioning, right? And this is the thing, right? The casino always comes out on top because A, they think in bets, right? And B, they control the position, right? So they always have control over the position, the terms, the whatever, right? As you go in the casino, you're on camera. You don't have a choice about that, right? You go in the casino, things are very, very controlled, right? There's certain things. I remember we were at the roulette table. There's no electronic device at the roulette table. This guy pulls out his phone, not realizing, right? And the croupier goes, "Oh, you gotta put your phone away. You gotta leave," right? And then, next thing is security's coming if you don't listen, right? So they have very strict control over their terms. And that's how they always win. And so you can do the same thing as an investor, right? If you're very conscious of your terms, you can always choose terms that are advantageous to you. So what do I mean by that? Well, I want to talk about a concept that comes from not real estate investing. It comes from stock investing. I mean, it's really a universal concept, but it is the concept of positioning, right? So when you're investing in stocks, you have a position. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you've heard the terms of shorting a stock or going long on a stock. Those are two separate, or like those are two opposing positions, right? Being long and short on something. And you can be long and short on anything, basically. So I'll give you an example, right? If you're long on real estate, then you're buying houses thinking that they will perform well against the currency you're using to buy them. If you're short on real estate, then you are selling houses to acquire the currency that is used to buy them, thinking that they will perform poorly against that currency. Right? So you do the same thing with a stock. If you're long on a stock, that means you think it will be worth more later. right? So you're long on that stock. You're currently buying the stock, right? Trying to hold it because you think it'll be worth more later. And if you're short on the stock, then you've got the stock, or maybe you're going to borrow it from somebody else and say, I don't think this is worth what it's worth right now, so I want to sell it today, right? Essentially, if you're going to do an actual short on the stock market, what you're doing is you're buying a company from you're not buying. Let's make the example concrete so I don't confuse myself. So Armando wants to short Walmart, for example, right? So he says, Walmart is trading for $30 a share, and I think it is overvalued by 50%. I think it should be trading for $20 a share, right? Which there's a lot of delta there, right? $10 per share. So he says, you know what? I am so confident that Walmart is only worth $20 a share that I am going to approach Aaron. I'm Aaron. I own 1,000 shares of Walmart, let's say. And he's going to say, you know what, Aaron, today's August the 28th. I want to borrow 1,000 shares of Walmart from you, right? And I will pay you back in a month, right? So I say, okay, September 28th, you're going to give me back my 1,000 shares. Armando says, yes, that's what I'm going to do. And so I lend him my shares, zero cost to Armando, right? He's gonna give them back to me later. And he might actually pay a premium. There may be a small, like a 2-3% fee to do this. But basically, there's very little or no expense to Armando. Now, he takes these shares from me. They're worth $30 a pop, and he's got 1,000 of them. So $30,000. But he believes they're only worth $20,000. So he's shorting. He's going to sell those shares. Bam. 30 grand in his bank account. Now, he owes me 1,000 shares of Walmart. But he believes Walmart's only worth 20K. So a month goes by, and Armando's right because he's a smart cookie. And Walmart is now trading for $20 per share. And Armando possesses 0 shares of Walmart, but he does possess $30,000. So he takes $20,000, buys 1,000 shares, gives them back to Aaron, and his short is done. He keeps the $10,000 in profit, right? That is a short. The reason people do that, and it can be very risky, right? Because it could have gone the other way and Armando could have lost a ton of money. The reason why people do this, right, is it's about positioning. Because in any given market, if you listen to the average person, the novice investor, the retail investor, if you will, the common market watcher, then they put all of their they put all of their attention and they obsess over what the market is doing. Oh, is the market going up? Oh, is the market going down? Oh my God, you can't make any money in this economy. Oh, this is a good economy, bad economy, blah, blah, blah. They kind of live and die by the market, so to speak. And living and dying by the market really means you're living and dying by the news, if we're being honest. And I hope I've made it clear I have a great deal of disdain for the news. So it's not a good way to live your life, right? Instead, if you're focused on positioning, then you're not so focused on the market, right? Because what the market is doing is always somewhat important because you're in it. But your position against that market really determines how you're going to do, right? So, give you another example. A few years ago, buy some real estate. That's me shorting the dollar, right? I'm saying, hey, I'll give you $300,000 today because I think the thing I'm buying is actually worth $500,000 tomorrow. And so I owe you that money back over the course of 30 years, 25 years, 20 years, whatever the mortgage term is. And I believe I'll pay you a lot less on my mortgage than I'll actually value out the property, right? And shorting the Canadian dollar, very smart idea. Right up to the COVID pandemic, or maybe even into the COVID pandemic, because our country is run by clowns and they've done the things that will inflate your currency. And so that is good for investors who shorted the currency because inflation means the currency is worth less, right? So I gave up dollars, right? I gave them up because I did not want them. They were not valuable to buy something I thought was more valuable. That's shorting the dollar or going long on real estate, however you want to look at it. It basically means the same thing, two sides of the same coin. So we're obviously in a very volatile market right now. Things are hard to, it's hard to discern exactly which way the market is going to move. And so that's a time when understanding position and then leveraging it, right, is going to be, is going to get you the most bang for your buck, right? So in real estate, we have a lot of different ways that we can invest, right? Obviously, there's the traditional buy and hold. There's the more advanced BRRRR, right? Buy, rehab, buy, rehab, rent, repeat, rent, refinance, repeat, right? Then we've got the flip, right? You buy a house, you make it over, you sell it for more than you paid for it. We've got the wholesale, right? You agree to buy a house, but before you close on that house, you sell it to somebody else for an assignment fee, right? We've got the wholesale. You agree to buy a house, you complete the purchase of that house, and then you immediately sell it to somebody else before you take possession of it. Worse than the wholesale because of taxes and such, but sometimes that's how those types of deals go. Right? You've got straight contract assignment, right? Like I was saying, you may buy a pre-construction, assign the contract before it's completed, right? Much rarer, but still a position one could take. You have lease to lease, lease to let, or lease to sublet. All that means is you're renting a place with permission to rent it on to somebody else. This is one of the harder positions to find yourself in, just because you have to, people have to feel confident that you're going to take care of their property in subletting it, and a lot of people don't, but it's common certainly for commercial real estate. And like the casino, maybe most people aren't going to play, what was that game I was talking about before, Pai Gow, but you have it set up for the few people who are willing to, right? As an investor, you don't need to serve the whole market, right? You don't need slot machines. If you want, you can just focus on poker, right? Or blackjack or what have you, right? Obviously in this analogy, right? Those are different investing styles, but you don't need to play the entire market, right? And you don't have enough resources to, even if you wanted to. So you get to pick a focus anyways. Finally, there are the, I guess, lower control, especially at this moment, avenues of investment. There's Airbnbs, right? You buy a property, and then instead of trying to find one person to pay you every month a profit on your property, you find multiple people who want it for an even shorter term and therefore will pay a higher premium. And that can be very profitable when Airbnbs are doing well and travel is doing well, and it can be a bit of a drag if you get screwed by COVID somehow. But I do know a lot of people, a lot of people around the world, not just in Canada, made lots of money running Airbnbs during COVID, including but not limited to sometimes running like authorized quarantining facilities. Excuse me. I know of one person who's an investor in the Caribbean who had it's basically like a resort for about eight or 10 units, not like huge, but they're on one of the smaller islands. They're on, is it Nevis? It might be Nevis they're on. I'm not sure, like St. Kitts and Nevis. Anyways, it's one of the smaller islands. And so basically the government came to them and was like, yeah, you're the place. We're going to quarantine people here. You can't let them out. You got to feed them, blah, blah, blah. We'll pay you. And so they did that for like a year and a half, and they were making pretty good money. So COVID didn't have to be bad for your Airbnb, but it was bad for most of them. There's also commercial real estate, right? If you don't think you can find or trust residential tenants, buy a commercial building, get commercial tenants. Commercial leases are usually a lot longer than a year, right? They can pay quite a bit more. They're, easier to calculate, easier to compete, which can be good or bad because it makes your product easier to substitute. But those leases can also be sticky, right? Because once a business has established itself and its reputation and its address somewhere, they typically don't want to move unless you really force them to, right? Also, of course, pardon me, you have a lot more control, right? The government is not nearly as involved in your business as a landlord for commercial real estate as they are with residential, right? Finally, you have the like lowest control types of investments. So you have REITs, right? Real estate investment trusts. You've heard of those, of course, smart centers and that sort of thing, Regus and those types of companies, right? Oh, pardon me. Who are aggregating real estate, investment grade real estate, and then paying out a dividend based on it as like publicly traded entities. This is probably the full stop worst way to invest in real estate, in the sense that a REIT basically offers you no control. It's like a stock. You have no control over what's going on. And one of the really attractive things about real estate investing is how much control it offers to the investor. So a REIT is really the worst option if you're interested in control. Now, they're fantastic because they tend to pay high dividends. As an alternative to a stock, they tend to pay fairly high dividends, be fairly low risk, and be effort free, right? You're obviously not managing property, dealing with tenants, anything like that, right? So if you've got the right asset mix, right? If you've got enough money to buy REITs, they can be very nice addition to your portfolio, but you're not getting rich trading REITs. It's not a great way to build wealth. After the REITs, you've got development deals. Development deals are probably second behind REITs for being bad in terms of control because you have very little. But you usually have either more than REITs or you don't have more than REITs, but you at least have a lot more upside, right? A development deal might make 100% return in 5 years. Just 20% a year, that's pretty good. Whereas a REIT might return like 9% a year or 7% a year. So, still respectable, but not blow your socks off like a development deal. Obviously, development deal could go bust, so there's more risk with it than there is with a REIT. But assuming it doesn't, you stand to make a lot more money. Excuse me. And then we've got private finance deals. Private finance deals can be, they're not as profitable as like flipping properties or anything like that, but they can be pretty profitable, and you have quite a bit of control over the terms. You get to say yes or no to anything you want. People apply, you get to look at who they are, their credit, whatever. You have a decent amount of control over the investment there. Obviously, there is a marketplace, so you are competing with other lenders. So, your control is limited in the sense that you can't just unilaterally declare, I want this, that, or the other. These investors, typically who you're dealing with, usually have other options. If they're coming to you with no other options, then that is what it is. But you need to understand that they often do have other options. If I use myself or like some of the deals we've done as an example, I think of the one deal where we paid $25,000 to hold on to their money for a year, right? That was a great deal for that person. They got $25,000 for doing basically nothing. They just had to wait 1 year for it. And they got it all as a lump sum, so that was really nice for them. Obviously, they had to give us the $250,000 or whatever it was to hold for that year, but they got that back plus their interest. So that's a great way to diversify your income. Again, hard to get rich this way. If you became a mortgage broker and you were putting the deals together yourself and you worked at it steadily, and especially as a mortgage broker, you can now get other people's money to lend and then take a cut of that as well. You could certainly grow your wealth quite substantially doing private lending. As a private individual who is not a broker, 10% per year, will grow your wealth, but it's only 10% a year. So good, even very good compared to stock market returns. And you can do very well making 7% per year on the stock market. So 10% is a fantastic number. But still slower than, say, running an active business where you're flipping or wholesaling and maybe you're generating a lot more value, right? So you have all these different strategies, right? And they can all be used to position you differently in the market, right? For example, let's say that you're short on real estate for the moment, right? You don't have confidence the price is going to go up. Maybe you're watching the GTA and you're seeing prices falling, right? Well, maybe you want to do private finance then. Now, there are some catches, right? Development deals in private finance require either you to have connections or to have accreditation, and you don't get accreditation unless you got, I think it's $250,000 of assets under management. So it's not a beginner move, but it is possible to get $250,000 under management pretty quickly, depending how aggressive you want to be and what it is that you like to do in the marketplace. But using those strategies, right, you can go short on housing, for example. You might say, I want my money in real estate, but I don't trust houses right now. I'll put money in at 10% on private loans on other people's properties where they've got lots of equity. If the price falls, whatever, it doesn't matter to me. I'll make my 10%, right? And that's great. Certainly in Toronto from the year 1990, like 6 or whatever, until about 2006 or so, the housing prices basically didn't move at all. So that 10% a year would have been the best game in town, right? Aside from flipping, which still would be profitable because the nature of flipping, right? Alternatively, if you're long on real estate, you might want to be buying and holding it, or you might want to be burying it, right? So that you can acquire more and more and see where that value goes, right? If you're low on resources, you might want to wholesale, right? Where you're not getting into the deals or assignments, right? Where you're not getting into the deals for a long time to tie up your resources, right? And where there's that potential to have a lot of value add, right? The best in terms of just wealth creation is probably doing burrs / flips, so like in that realm. I say / flips because you might refinance or you might sell, but basically what you're doing is you're doing that active appreciation to really bump up the value of the property. That's where you're going to see your best bang for your buck. But ultimately, each of these things, I guess, you should pick one or two to focus on because it's a big list and you can't be an expert at everything, right? And so it's much better to really understand how to do one or two of these deals kind of inside and out than it is to understand how to do each of them, but poorly. So that's one thing. You kind of got to pick a lane or two. But positioning is going to allow you, in this market where we've got interest rates potentially still climbing and inflation still hammering away at us, right? It's not a very good time to be a private lender, right? Inflation is good for the borrower. It's bad for the lender. So why would you want to lend, let's say, your money at 10% in a 6% inflationary environment? You're actually only making 4% on your money, right? So you wouldn't want to do private finance right this second. Instead, because there's inflation, you really probably want to leverage, pardon me, as much as you can, right? Because the lender wins in a highly inflationary environment, right? So you as the lender now, you as the borrower are, if you're paying 4% for money and we have a 7% inflation rate, it's as if the bank is giving you 3% per year to hold their money. Fantastic, right? And again, this all comes down to position and understanding, okay, where am I in the market? What do I expect the market to do? And then acting accordingly. Right. So like as it stands, and really this has been true for the last two, maybe even 3 years, having exposure to debt, especially large exposure to debt, has been basically good for you because the cost to service that debt has been lower than the inflation on that debt. And so you're getting a bunch of free money back in terms of that debt losing its buying power. So if you use that debt immediately and then pay it back over time, what you bought with that debt is worth more than the debt itself. And each year that you hold that debt, its value is shrinking, right? Relative to what you bought with it. That's what inflation does. So we're in a great position where right now, if you can acquire debt and put it to good use, that will get you ahead, right? As the market starts to change, right? Because in the next coming months, hopefully, we'll start to see things start to change, right? Either inflation will start to drop or interest rates will start to level off, or I mean, we're all hoping for recovery, right? So that's what that would look like, more or less. And as that happens, right, then it's time to sit down and say, okay, well, maybe I've got to relook at private finance. Maybe I've got to relook at, borrowing this debt and leveraging. Am I still getting that premium from the inflation? Am I still worried about inflation, right? Totally unrelated to real estate. Like, I have a bunch of cryptocurrency. Why do I have cryptocurrency? Because I think that inflation might be the single biggest issue that we deal with in a generation. I think that the funny money BS that's been going on, not just with Canadian dollars, but with money all around the world, is probably coming to a head. That's what I think. I have no idea. It's so hard to say because I see things that normal people don't see because I'm, plugged in and care about those things. And I don't really know where your average person's head is at around those things. But I think everybody recognizes, regardless of, whether they're an investor or they're just, like a mall dweller. I think everybody realizes there's something messed up with the money, even if they don't know what. And I think people are going to continue to be aware of that and take it into consideration as they make investing and purchasing choices. And that is going to probably be a good medium to long term for borrowers and investors, of course, and it'll probably be bad medium to long term for cash holders, right? And obviously, we've seen those cryptocurrencies just do crazy things. It's not so much because their value is up, although there is a bit of that. A lot of it is because they are, they're being measured in dollars, and the dollar's being inflated, right? So that's something to think about. So again, position and exposure, these are things that we should be thinking about as investors. And of course, what those really mean, right? Position, it's another word for perspective, really, right? And perspective is so valuable to a real estate investor. When I was in Niagara yesterday, we went on a wine tour. We went to this vineyard, and this family's had this land for 150 years. 150 years they've had this land. And nobody ever really did anything with the land. I think it was a quarry for a time. They maybe dug up some stones and stuff, but basically they had this beautiful big piece of land in Niagara Falls. Didn't do anything with it. 20 years ago, the fourth or fifth generation to inherit this land, and yes, I recognize these are very privileged, lucky people. Most of us don't get to inherit land like that, but all the same, this fourth or fifth generation person, she inherited the land, and she decided, hey, we've got this land. It's in this kind of wine region, this burgeoning wine region. Let's plant grapes. And so she did. She planted grapes and started a winery 20 years ago. And now today it's a successful winery and blah, blah. They're, making bottles of this and that and selling it and doing well for themselves. Anyways, if you do the math, right, you put a vine on a square foot of soil, and maybe it needs some clearance for the leaves, so maybe you actually end up using 3 square feet or so of soil, whatever. And that plant can produce 1/4 of a bottle of wine, so you need 4. So we're looking at 3 square feet per plant, 12 square feet for 4 plants to make 1 bottle of wine. So if you pay $3 per square foot, that's $36 a year for that, for the grapes to make that wine. So now you need to sell your wine for whatever, $48, $50 to make profit, right? Okay, cool. Basically what they're doing, right? And it's pretty easy to calculate. Okay, I've got X number of square feet in my acre and X number of acres, and I can produce X number of plants to produce X number of wine, and hopefully I can sell it for this much margin and I can make a profit, right? It's the wine business. It's probably a pretty good business. People like wine. There's certainly a lot of demand there, and you can charge a premium for it. Okay. This business was taking along for, 17, 18 years, right? And then about 3 years ago, they decided to expand the business, basically, for lack of a better way to put it, and start doing wine tours. And with the wine tours, they decided to put a restaurant on the property. And with the restaurant, they decided, let's do a restaurant and event space so people can have weddings and stuff like that. And so the business has really pivoted so that now they're an event destination, right? Hosting 2 or 3 weddings per day on the weekends. Plus they host events, birthdays, that sort of thing. They sell food. I think they probably cater, although we didn't talk about that, but they probably cater. Of course, they sell their wine. And since they're catering and they have the restaurant, they also sell charcuterie, so cheeses and meats that pair well with their wines, right? And so they've established this entire kind of retail and food service business on top of the vineyard. And this is all real estate investing, if you think about it, right? So they've got land. They put the land to use as a vineyard. They're working it, right? But then, Elias, you'll know for sure this concept of highest and best use, right? If you have land, what's the highest and best use for it? Should it be an apartment building? Should it be a factory? Should it be, what should it be? What's the highest and best use? So in this case, she decided the highest and best use was a vineyard, right? But then it turns out that vineyard is kind of a tourist attraction, and it's got all these things that go with it. So it is better, rather than to use the land straight for producing wine, it's better to parcel off a small portion of that land and then build an event center so people can take pictures in your vineyard for their weddings and stuff, and they'll pay you a premium for that. So that's a second revenue stream, right? And then, if they're going to be there taking pictures, well, we should feed them, right? So now that's a third revenue stream, right? Now, well, if we're feeding them and we're storing food on the premises anyways, well, why not sell that food to our customers so that, yeah, they can buy a meal, but also they can buy this food to prepare for themselves at home. Okay, now you've got a third or a fourth revenue stream, right? So by taking perspective to their deal, they probably already had a deal, probably already was a winner, probably already made money. Certainly they've been in business for like 15 to 18 years, right? Just making wine. But by adding some perspective, they were able to add in these other value add opportunities, right? And produce a lot more revenue and profit potentially than they were producing before, right? So this is the same thing with all real estate. Is you're looking for those opportunities. What is the thing that nobody else sees? What is the thing that I can do? Am I going to rent out this space for storage since I can't use it for residential? Maybe I can fit. A great example is like mixed use, right? I've got this building, and of course the government is highly involved in this, right? You don't have a universal say on whether or not your buildings are mixed use. But a cool concept is a mixed use building, right? Where downstairs, maybe you've got some shops, a restaurant, whatever. So you're getting some commercial rent. And then upstairs, you've got tenants getting residential rent. So it's a bit of a mix, right? You're using the land to its fullest. Obviously, a business doesn't want to be located on the third story of a walk up, right? But a residence doesn't mind at all, right? So you can have both, and you're taking advantage of who has what preferences, right? To try and position yourself to maximize your income. That's what you always want to be doing, is looking for those opportunities, right? And where somebody else hasn't seen them, or where you're the first person who's looking for them and finding them, you can apply them and make a big, potentially a large profit, right? And of course, there's got to be that faith to follow through and actually take action on the good ideas. But having perspective, that can really be the difference making. That can generate a lot of wealth quickly, right? If you, for example, find a property that's being used as a single family, you've got the perspective to turn into a fourplex, for example, you might make a lot of money on that deal, both from rent, but also from selling it to an investor down the line, right? So a lot of this is about perspective. It's about looking at things and really trying to understand how you can bring value to that deal to maximize the income. And of course, you don't need to do that, right? You can just buy and hold. It works. If you analyze, you just buy and hold. You don't need to do any of this perspective crap. But perspective allows you to take it from, a consistent, maybe with buy and holds, you can do 5, 8, 10%, something like that. And perspective allows you to do 30, 40, 50%, right? It's that shifting perspective and adding value that is the bulk of wealth generation, right? And so if you can do that, you can generate some wealth for yourself, right? And use that to invest and to live off of. So that book again was Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. If you're interested in checking it out, I'm gonna stop here for today. Hopefully, as always, that was helpful. And obviously, there's a lot of different ways to skin a cat, as they say. This is, of course, true with real estate investing as well, right? And focusing on that strategy, which most aligns with your investing goals, is a surefire way to make sure that you are progressing towards your end goals financially and in terms of investing. So that's it, actually. Now, before I go, Let's see. So